Well, thank you for having me. It's a pretty awesome program. My name is Suzanne Boyd. I'm the founder and CEO of Tech, and I can talk a little bit more about my company in a bit. I'm also an affiliate assistant professor at the University of Washington at the Seattle campus, where I teach at the Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering, and I'm the proud mother of 3 kids. I started my business in '97 in a spare bedroom of a small duplex that my husband and I were renting. And fast forward to today, about 20 years in, we are an awesome team with 2 offices. Our headquarters are in Olympia. We work a lot with the government, and also a research lab and office in Seattle near Pike Place Market. And we enjoy wonderful partnerships with some amazing clients, government clients, nonprofit clients, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the familiar tech companies that currently reside in the Seattle area. And I would say that I'm a work in progress, always, but I do have some lessons to learn along the journey, and I look forward to sharing them with you, and I really welcome any and all questions that you might have about becoming an entrepreneur, keeping it going, any angst or anxieties you may have about it. I've probably experienced them, so please feel free to ask questions.
All right, so interactive not only from my standpoint, but from theirs as well, when they have a question that they'd like to ask. So why don't we go ahead and start off with your genesis
Company.
story, right? Why
Sure.
did you decide to do this, and how did it end up happening?
Genesis story. There wasn't a point of time. I feel like being an entrepreneur is in my blood. It was always the path for me. I'm the daughter of parents that started and grew many businesses. Their parents did. I watched them pursue their passion and be successful at it, and it created a way of life for me and my siblings. We got to travel. Some of those companies grew, and we spent time abroad. Traveled a lot. So I saw from an early age the opportunities that being an entrepreneur offered, and how exciting it is to pursue your passion. I did work, had a real job, for a few real jobs, waitressing, and one real job at a PR company. And they were great companies. I was really dissatisfied with my inability to make an impact. I felt more like a cog in a wheel than being able to directly drive an impact that I wanted to make in my life. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why I also wanted to pursue being an entrepreneur, having a direct impact with where I put my talent and my time. And then the third reason I think is, why not? I mean, it just seemed like all I needed was my brain and my relationships and a computer to start something, and if it doesn't work out, I could always get a job. So that's kind of the reasons why I decided to.
And it's funny because it fell right into what I was saying earlier about growing up in a family that was entrepreneurial. That the idea of starting a company was one that actually happened to be right there.
Yes.
And that's great. And so the why not, and there was a lack of fear of failure, it sounds like, at the very beginning, but it's always there. When you are a small business and you're trying to grow it, as soon as you get that first customer, that first employee, or anything else like that, you are now beholden to them. I mean, you're answering to all of these different people. So being a small business and growing is also kind of exciting and scary. What was it like when you first got out of the gate and you first started landing customers?
Yeah. So I was working at this PR firm I mentioned, and had sort of made this decision that I wanted to transition while I was in graduate school. I don't know why anyone quits their job while they have tuition to pay, but I did. And I talked to my boss and said, this is a transition I want to make. This is the right thing for me. And he was very supportive. And also, as word got out that I was leaving that company, one of the clients that I was working said, Suzanne, we really want to continue to work with you. And I discussed that with my boss, and he was also very supportive of that. So I started my business with a client in hand, which was a great place to be. And we were living, as I mentioned, in a duplex. We had a spare bedroom, and there wasn't enough space to both have a bed and a desk at the same time. So my husband built me a loft bed. So for the first 2 years, I spent time under this loft bed, and I couldn't actually, stand up under it. I'd have to always scoot out like that. And that, the first years was balancing studying and getting my master's degree with starting to build up my company. And most of the work I did at the time was website design and web development. But as I was studying, I realized that two of my loves started to collide. I have a background in anthropology. I traveled a lot. I really loved studying people and cultures. And then in graduate school, I was exposed to technology, and the two came together. I realized that if I can study human behavior and what people need and use that knowledge to inform and to make technologies more usable, more useful, more impactful to improve people's lives. So that's when the name Anthrotech really came about. After I graduated, I had many mentors, both professors, who put me in the way of some awesome opportunities. And one of those opportunities was doing a project for a state agency, Department of Labor and Industries. And they wanted to understand why it is that small business owners don't use or act on safety and health regulations in the state of Washington. Perfect project for me. First project with a state agency. And we went around and visited all these entrepreneurs to understand their way of life and also to understand why weren't they using these safety and health regulations. And with that knowledge, we completely re-architected the rules, plain talked them so that small businesses could understand them and put them into action in their workplace. And that was that agency's first foray into listening to their customers and acting on what they were learning to make something more usable and useful. And our company, I didn't mention it, we are a user experience consultancy. We help organizations create better user experiences.
So that idea of having the experience doing the web development design and just the user interface and layout I can definitely see where that merging with the idea of human behavior.
Absolutely.
And moving in with that. So that's great. When did you actually, was that right out of the gate what you ended up doing was the user experience piece, or did it merge into that? Did it evolve into that?
It was there right in the beginning, but that became really our core focus is using what we call the user-centered design process, which is all about people first, understanding their needs, their behaviors, and applying that to the design and development of experiences. We work a lot in the digital space, websites, web applications, mobile apps, but also improving complicated forms, rules and regulations, environments, and the majority of our clients are government agencies, nonprofits, and organizations that have a social impact mission.
Well, what a great first step to have to take with your first state client, and that you got a chance to go out and visit with all these different entrepreneurs and find out what their needs are. I don't know what the answer is. You actually did answer a little bit of it when you said you created real speak out of what the regulations were.
Mm-hmm. Plain talk,
yes. Real speak, plain talk out of what they were doing. And in my mind, the first thing I thought was that a lot of these small businesses probably, that was like the last thing on their mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so for you had that opportunity to talk to entrepreneurs. You mentioned some professors. Where else did you get that sort of guidance or mentorship to make your company grow and work?
From all over the place. It takes a village. I owe the success of this company to former professors, mentors, clients who became huge fans, past and current employees, my family. It's been a network of support that I can tap into. The project I mentioned for the health and safety regulations was also the agency's first foray into understanding user-centered design. And so that project led to another opportunity with the same agency where we were brought in to completely redesign their website using a user-centered design process. And then the other agencies started to notice, wow, if we really design for people, they're able to be more successful with the services that we're offering as a government agency. And so we started to build this reputation for bringing customer-centered design into government organizations. And the first, I would say, 10 years of the company, we were a handful of people doing this work and really building up our reputation. We didn't have an office. We worked, from coffee shops, on client sites, at the kitchen table, you name it. But we were doing this work that was impacting lots and lots of people in Washington State. From there, federal government started to take note of this. So it's been really an amazing journey, and we pride ourselves not just in coming in and fixing a product, but also teaching the organization to become more customer-centric. It's a new way of making decisions for a lot of government agencies.
So any of the new entrepreneurs thinking about building their companies, it comes back to, again, make certain that the product that you're delivering meets the needs of your customers and actually goes beyond what their expectations are. It sounds in this particular case like you almost did some growth based on word of mouth within state governments.
We did. We built up an excellent reputation because of the work that we did. And there was no marketing, there was no sales channel.
So
it was word of mouth.
Sales or marketing, it was organic, as you say.
It was organic, yeah.
And I've actually heard that come up a few times now with some companies that are just delivering a great product, and then the product they're delivering is being shared with other folks, and that's how they gain their customers. You're now 20 years. Do you do any sales or marketing at this point in time?
Yes.
All right. When did that transition occur? When did that happen?
The beginning years of growing the company was organic, partially by design, because I have 3 kids and I wanted to make sure I could, find that balance, whatnot. But then at a certain point, you kind of reach a plateau where maybe your revenue stalls out. And so we made a very conscious decision to grow about 2 years ago. And we adopted what's called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You can Google that and learn a lot. But it's really
Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Yeah. It's a framework for growing your business in a sustainable way. And so that's when we started the work of really getting clear about our vision, about our values as a company, about our 10-year target, our 3-year target, a 1-year target, and then breaking that down, that 1-year target down into the world of 90 days. So every quarter we have a set of very specific and focused goals, 3 to 5, that we are trying to accomplish. And if we accomplish those, it moves us further towards the 1-year goal. If we accomplish the 1-year goal, it moves us further to the 3-year goal. So it's a way to be very disciplined and focused. Plus, as part of adopting that system, we had to start standardizing processes. How do we do HR? How do we do finances? How do we do invoices? How do we do our craft of research and design and so on? So that's been a pivoting point for the company to not be organic, but to be very deliberate about where and how we want to grow.
That's great. I want to make sure that if you do have questions.
Did you have a question?
I did have, but I know it's a long topic, but I know when you said, I'm probably overthinking it, but when you get the revenues from the federal and the state, is it a different type of revenue? Like, does it get taxed differently, or is it just considered revenue? If you get paid by the state or the federal government? It's
revenue to the company. It gets procured differently. So you can't just go to a government agency and write them a proposal and say, hey, I'd like to work with you. It's a competitive procurement process that you go through. You respond to RFPs, requests for proposal, and you compete with the entire community for getting that work.
When you were starting your business, or maybe even right now, have you ever felt like you were spreading yourself too thin, like you had a lot of projects going on, you didn't know which one to focus on, or did you work extra hard and complete all those, or did you cut some things off? What did you do?
Both. I work really hard. I think being an entrepreneur means you are putting in 200% and working hard hours, and it doesn't feel like hard work because you're so passionate about what you're doing. But you want to balance the plates that you have, spinning very carefully, so you don't perform poorly on a project and get a negative reference or get a negative word of mouth or something like that. So to me, the way I make it work, and I know it's one of the questions, I am always prioritizing. I prioritize every day. I prioritize every week. I prioritize every quarter to make sure that I'm focusing on the right things that is going to move the company forward and try not to drop any balls. Have I dropped balls? Absolutely, but It's a continual looking at prioritizing where you spend your time. And I have felt spread thin. And when that happens, we look at what is the part of the work where we talk about, being in too many seats, essentially. What does that look like? And can we turn that into a position and staff that position? And that's the work that we've been doing over the past year and a half or so. Hiring somebody in charge of business development, hiring somebody who does social media and digital marketing.
Way back when I was in high school, we had an astronaut come and talk to us a long time ago. And one of the things that stuck with me was he said, make a list. That was his big takeaway from that one. Make a list. Because you're going to get confronted with so many things. You have to prioritize them. You have to decide what it is that you're going to take on. So with your role also as founder and CEO, that has some additional responsibilities that fall into play as well. So how often are you called in to do things that you had no expectation you might have to, but now do so because of your CEO role? Maybe business to business partnerships or anything to that effect?
Business to business partnerships, I'm in those conversations when we're trying to make strategic partnerships with other firms to go after certain opportunities. I think it goes back to the note I made about prioritizing your time and the note you made about making a list. I find that to be very therapeutic because you have so many things coming at you, so much to do. You have to not just go with emotions, but sit down and literally plan out what do I absolutely need to move the needle on, and what do I have to say no to as well. Yeah.
Especially with a newer company or a growing company, having to say no because you're doing so well, you really can't bring on something else. That's a really tough one to do. What's probably the hardest challenge you've faced so far with the company?
I would say the hardest challenge I've faced has also been the most rewarding one. Our company, in certain ways, we're like a tight-knit family, and we've had awesome employees who've really helped shape the voice and identity of the company in the early years, move on to start a new chapter of their own. And that can be really hard, but at the same time, very, very rewarding to know that your company was the place where they shaped their early professional career. And also when someone else moves on, while it feels like you've got a family member leaving, it opens the door to new energy and new perspectives coming into the company.
And I didn't want to, okay, good, there you go.
Yeah, so typically we see the successes of companies or founders. What I want to know is, what was your lowest point in your career?
The lowest point in my career? I don't know if I've hit it yet. I don't know. It's like, I can't, unfortunately, I would, but I can't point to a period of time or a situation where it was the lowest point of my career. I think being an entrepreneur can feel like you're on a roller coaster, and you got to be even keeled about that. Like, that is your normal, right? I can't point to an event or something. Maybe it'll come to me a little bit later. It's a good question.
Anyone else right now? What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs if they're looking to start their own business?
You've got to be willing to work hard, harder than most people think. And therefore, I would recommend you do something you're really passionate about, that really, that you love doing, that is for a good cause, that makes you feel alive, because then all those hours, they won't burn you out. I would also surround yourself by people who want you to succeed, whether they're mentors, whether they're employees, whether you're accessing resources like here, the Vibe, where there's people who want you to succeed. Don't try to do it all on your own. I think those are some of the big pieces, yeah.
How did your parents and partner react when you decided to quit your job, even though you're paying X amount for your master's degree?
Well, that's a really great question. My parents and my partner, now husband, they were very supportive. They believed that I could do it and that I probably would do it, regardless of how they reacted, honestly. So they, my parents, having been entrepreneurs all their lives, they said, yeah, you go for it, you can do it. That was always the message. Whatever you set your heart on, you can do it. So very supportive family. Yeah.
At what point in your career, have you ever had to outsource any of your work like an independent contractor? And at what point in the career did you have to do that?
We still do that from time to time. When there is an engagement that calls for more resources than we have available, I might find a partner. And we have strategic partnerships in place where we can add, say, subcontractors to our work. So either in situations where I felt like we need more staff to serve the client and do a good job, or where we needed a very unique area of expertise to come in and complement the skills that we have internally already. And so those are partnerships that have been shaped over a course of 20 years. And some of them are with old mentors that are pioneers in the field that we can still call upon and plug in as needed, if you will.
Kind of going off of what.
Wait, we're gonna.
No,
Oh,
if
sorry.
he's gonna continue off
All
of
right.
it, then you can go.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. What time do you think, like, in the company were you like prepared to give what you're doing to somebody else, like replacing what you work really hard to do, and hiring, another person to take that place?
I'm still working on that. I'm still actively trying to let go and trying to find opportunities to what we call delegate and elevate somebody else. But big moves were made when we hired somebody to lead our sales and business development, because I was the rainmaker for so many years and know that very well, know our business very well. I'm very equipped at looking at a situation a client needs and saying, here's the strategy for how we're going to solve your problems and move this forward. So hiring that person was huge, and getting her up to speed to learn what I know and lead that part of the organization, very important part of the organization. But it feels awesome, actually. It feels great to have that support and not to be, have 7 plates in the air and not do anything particularly well.
You felt like really comfortable giving someone else the power of pretty much like the lifeline of your company, like for money wise, like.
Yeah. I'm still involved.
Right.
But no, it feels great. It feels great not to have to respond to every RFP and spend hours writing those things, and to have somebody take it very far for you where you're reviewing it, or you're still in that very important client presentation, doing the presenting, but you're not responsible for every single word.
And I love that reaction of it. There's a relief.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes, especially when it's like, if there's so much on your plate, who do you trust and who believes in what your purpose is that you can take that over. And then also, we all have our own weaknesses, and finding someone who has a strength that helps
Absolutely.
to cover whatever our weaknesses are. That's always a wonderful relief to feel as well.
Yeah.
When something like that happens. Now, you had a question. I was going to go after that, but I'll let you go first here.
So starting a business and running a business involves a lot of risk, and I want to know what's something you felt like in the past that you felt was really risky, and you just did it anyways and it worked. Like, what was something like that?
Just today, I signed a letter of intent to start a 7-year lease in downtown Seattle.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment.
The lease is not signed yet, but the intent to sign the lease. That is scary.
Why is that scary?
Well, because you're committing to spending X thousands of dollars on rent. And so you are betting on your vision that you're going to get the types of clients and type of work in the door for 7 years. You're committing to that. So it's scary, but it's exhilarating at the same time, right? But you know, I think entrepreneurs don't take the risk-free road.
I think it's inherent,
It's a
right?
very opposite, yeah.
So, in following on to what I was asking earlier, I was talking about knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, bringing someone in. Obviously, when you're successful, it's because you've got a differentiator. There's something about you and what your company does that separates you from all the other choices that they might have. Whether there's a competitive process or anything else. So, what is your superpower? What's your secret sauce? What's your differentiator? What is it about what your company does that's gotten that great word of mouth going?
I think I can speak to that for the company and me as a person. So our company's core expertise really is in utilizing the user-centered design process to build great customer experiences, and in training and mentoring and bringing the organization itself along to become more customer-centric. So in a way, we are both consultants and designers and researchers, but we're also change agents. And we define our success not just by coming in and saying, here, you've got this awesome website or mobile app or whatever it might be. Our partnerships, the one I mentioned, is still ongoing, 17 years. We are changing the organization in the process. We are helping them become more customer-centric. And I have an opportunity, and my team has an opportunity to work at the leadership level, the middle management level, to set strategies, to change their processes, to train and teach and mentor them in how to do this work themselves. So that's definitely a key differentiator, as well as our social impact focus.
Do you ever have conflicts with your clients, or not even with the clients, but the middle management or the larger? Because just from what you're saying and changing perspectives, changing the way that companies and people in the company are thinking about doing different things, I feel like that would bring a lot of clash.
It does bring clash, especially. Yes, the answer is yes. Conflicts. Often because we're bringing a new way of making decisions. So let's say you're all in a technology company. Very often when you decide to build something, we go around and we talk to the business and we capture business requirements. And then we go and we figure out the tools and technology and we get technical requirements. And the customer is often an afterthought. What do they need, right? Success isn't just building a product that works from a technical perspective. Success means the customer can work with it easily and effectively. We bring the customer to the table. And so, yes, we've been in many rooms where all of a sudden there's a new voice, there's a new decision maker. And not everyone's comfortable with that, and not everyone gets it right away. So a lot of our work is evangelizing for the customer point of view, educating people, showing that this is a proven process. This is not something Anthrotech has made up. Going through it will lead to a better experience for your customer as well, and it will lead to business benefits. So a lot of education and evangelizing along the way. And sometimes those are tough conversations, to have with engineers or developers.
I had a question about that too. So I know, do you work just locally in the state, or do you work outside of the state as well?
We work in the state and outside of the state.
Because I know, if you work outside, how do you keep track of all the state laws and requirements for putting in those little websites so that you abide by the laws? Do you have a specific team just for that?
We have, that's not me, that's not my strong suit. But we do keep track of it. Also, just employment laws, setting up to have employees in another state, all of that is not handled by me, but definitely handled by the team, specific members of the team.
Your first employee, did you feel like you might not be able to afford them? Or how did it go?
Yes. Are you about to hire somebody?
Yeah.
Our first employee works here at UW Tacoma right now. She's a professor. And I met her via at my graduate program at UW. And we hired her as a contractor at first, which was a safe way to say, okay, let's see how this works out. You know, what's our chemistry? What's your chemistry with the clients? Do we have more work coming in? And so when it was clear that, you know, we were really building that reputation and getting a lot more interest in our work, we hired her on as a full-time employee. And then the second one, and then the third one, right? So that's how I dealt with that. Another thing that we have going on in our company is an internship program where, because I teach as well, I meet a lot of very awesome, amazing, smart students, and we'll bring them in for an internship to see, you know, how are we working together, and then if it's a good match, we'll bring them on as an employee to stay with us.
And what programs do you generally draw from when you're doing the internship type program?
The Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering, which is located at the College of Engineering at UW.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but the internship opportunities go beyond that as well. We get applicants, but that's definitely a great, you know, of course, relationship for our company.
So I don't know if you had any tips or advice for what I'm about to say, but I want to know your point of view and what do you think about it. So for my first few employees, I'd want to hire them, and then I want all the sales. I'll tell them, hey, if I can't afford you, I won't be able to pay you, but all the sales will go to you the first 2 weeks, and if that does well, then I'll start paying you minimum wage. But if that doesn't do well, then we'll just close the business. Because what I have already a few locations open, but I'm trying to open the new locations, and I don't know if they're going to be busy or not.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that's a smart idea to have all the sales go to them, but also keep track of how much I'm making? That way I can know if I'm affording them or not. Because I don't want to tell them I'll pay the minimum wage and then not be able to afford them, and then have, like, I don't know.
I think from what I don't know if you want to do that.
Yeah.
The revenues come to the company, not to the employee.
Wait, what do you think? Very beginning?
Like the revenues, like from a legal aspect, I don't think you could do that because if the money's coming in from the business, so the business has to pay that money or do taxes and everything. You can't just say we're gonna give it straight to them.
I mean, the tax and all that, I already know how much that'll cost, and I can pay that for myself. But I just don't want to end up having, like, I don't know how much I'm gonna have to pay them, maybe $1,000, $2,000 in 2 weeks. I don't know where I'm gonna get that money if we don't make it. And especially if I have like 3 new locations open, and I don't know how busy those locations. And that's why I was asking you if I'm spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
think
have an opinion, I'll take it
Yeah.
offline. My opinion's gonna be no,
yeah.
just so you know. And we could go into a little deeper as to why, but it's entirely your situation. If I may.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
will tell you just from my experience, many young companies, a lot of folks who are trying to get things started, think about how am I going to get started? Well, I'll get salespeople who will then, I'll pay my salespeople based on commission. That's the general approach is, you know, they're going to go out, they'll do the sales, we'll pay on commission. I found over time that if you can at least provide some base along with the commission, you're in much better shape because sales it's not an overnight thing. Sales takes a lot of development work, and it depends on your company. That's why I said I'll take it offline with you, find out more about what your company is and does, and then let you know. It's definitely a you get what you pay for sort of thing as well. And that may be very different than what you were thinking. But
No, I was going to advise against it too from the employee's perspective. I don't know that I feel comfortable signing on with you as an employee.
I know. I'm gonna have to get some friends or something.
yeah. Now, that's different. That's different than talking to one of your friends and say, I'm trying to make this happen. Would you do me this favor? And that's what you're asking for.
That's probably.
And then if it's
Actually,
like,
you know
will you
what?
do,
I'll probably end up doing that.
and if you say if you do this favor and it works out, then maybe there's something down the
This
road.
is gonna be a long drive.
All right. It's not mine to say, but again. So I have a question for you, and
Yeah.
and we'll go back to some questions. So 7-year lease, again, congratulations, because that means in your mind, there's something that's going to be happening 7 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned your planning that you've been doing through this entrepreneurial operational system. What does the company look like 7 years from now?
7 years from now, we are taking on projects with an even greater social impact. We're already doing some really amazing work with state agencies, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I can't talk about it too much, but where the work we are doing is positively impacting lots and lots of people. And that's what my team is passionate about. We work in public transportation and higher education and early learning and issues around the environment and so on. So more of that.
And I almost could have told you that without having asked the question, because when you were discussing your company and what you provided, it was very obvious when the animation occurred for the solution. And so you've just basically confirmed what I thought. There's an impact aspect.
Yes.
And that's when you talk about passion for the company and delivering the product.
Absolutely.
That sounds to me also like it's part of that superpower secret sauce that you have, is that passion for change.
It absolutely
Was that a
is.
deliberate mission value statement you put in?
It came about, you know, I always felt like I was so blessed growing up. I grew up in Europe. My family is uber supportive. Good access to education, to healthcare, all of these things that just sort of fell in my lap. So there's this internal like duty, like what can I do to give back to the world? And that's where I think that passion comes from. This is my way.
Yeah. That absolutely will affect clients, yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Sorry. How did you? I know in the beginning you were saying that you quit your job because you didn't feel like you were giving enough. You didn't feel like you were giving impact, right? And I know that right now you're giving impact in a different kind of sense. But how do you change that experience for your employees? You know, how do you make it so that they're giving impact and they know and they feel important in your company?
I think that for me, impacting them is part of why I love being an entrepreneur as well. I love bringing opportunities to the team that's going to stretch them just a little bit every time and grow their professional skill set. And I see it happening, you know, every day essentially. And so they know they're making an impact because the work they're doing is getting positive feedback from our clients and from the users that are using their products. And I'm making an impact by empowering them to do that work and watching them grow and stretch as a professional in our field.
Also, I on that. So when you first started your company, has your values changed from when you first started to where it is now?
No, I don't think so. They were just never really articulated. And so the process of going through this EOS framework or entrepreneurial operating system, one of the first things we had to do was articulate our core values as a company. And one of them is making an impact. And one of them is helping others succeed. And one of them is set the bar high. And one of them is continual growth and learning, which is part of why I love doing what I do. I'm always learning. You know, to be a CEO, to be a consultant, to be a good supporter of my team and where they're trying to go. So they're core to me, but they were not articulated as company values. But it is what drives our culture. It helps us make decisions as to who to hire, how to reward, you know, how to be in the world as a company, essentially.
First one, in the beginning stages, did you ever feel like it might not work, the business?
Am I not what?
It might not work, it might not be successful, and like, how did you get over that? Or did you always feel like this is gonna work?
No, there's always doubts, but the confidence is stronger than the doubts. You know, you're taking a chance. You're taking, I think, a less predictable journey when you're doing something on your own versus accepting a job somewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, you think, is this going to work? And it might fail. Those are all fears you have. But in the end, I think for me, my confidence in, like, my time spent thinking about it being successful exceeds the time thinking about what if it goes wrong.
Because you could have a million reasons of how it could go wrong.
Yes, you can.
And that could put you down.
Yes.
And then my second question is, I don't know if you have a book, but if you would recommend a book that helped you out, go start your business and build a business and get to where you are right now, is there any book
No, I don't. I have a husband who reads like 10 business books a week. That's an exaggeration. And he gives me the Cliff Notes versions of it.
I'll throw one at you. That's a great starter one. The $100 startup.
Currently reading.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, when we talk about things like just when you were describing getting started and what you wanted to do, there's a service element of what you're doing. You basically are providing sort of many of the different companies in that book or service-based.
Yeah. But Reed and I would say instrumental in my direction have been my mentors, who I can call up and ask advice on everything from pricing to competition to what's happening in our fields, what should I be aware of, do I have any blind spots right now, all of that.
And I love that you've got these roots within the university space, both
Yeah.
within this new employee as well as your time spent, because everything that you're describing is part of that ongoing educational learning process for yourself and for your employees. And I think that's wonderful. Do you take what you do in the classroom and ever bring it to your employee base?
What I teach in a classroom?
Well,
Or, yeah.
your approach to teaching as well.
Say more, what do you mean?
So you have students within your classes and you go about a certain curriculum based in terms of how you teach them, how you follow through with what they've learned. And I wondered if you ever use that same sort of technique within your own employee base to train them up and get them working hard.
Oh, what I teach in the classroom is what we practice as a company. So there's total alignment there. And so most of the team members are already well versed in that practice. But when it comes to like my teaching style in the classroom and some of the techniques we use, yeah, I bring those to the companies and I bring those to the trainings and workshops that we do for our team and for our clients as well. It's very hands-on and very interactive. I believe that you learn through doing, not by, watching somebody talk about a certain topic.
So we've actually had
experiential.
pretty long here, and I know that you guys are. Any last questions? I know you have one there.
Oh yeah, it was about the $100 startup. Pretty much every business book I've read, they always talk about blog or tell people about how you're doing, like in the beginning stages of your business. That way, by the time you launch or go out in public, you've already built customers that have been watching. I don't know if you ever did that or if that's worked or or
Blogging?
yeah, not just like blogging, like putting it up on social media, letting people know that the process of until you launch. That way, by the time you launch, there's already people who've been following you and might end up being potential customers.
Yeah.
That confused me. Like that really confused me. I'm not sure how to do that or.
Yeah, that might be really smart advice. That's not something that I did personally. We just had someone join our team who is an expert in social media and digital marketing and is doing that for the company. But prior to that, it was more about doing great work and getting great clients' references and word of mouth and building up a portfolio of successful work that we could then bring to the next engagement. That may just be a timing thing. I started my business a long time ago.
I know that some of you have to run to classes, do other things like that, but I do want to take a moment and say thank you to Suzanne for coming and
Thank
talking
you for
today.
having
Very
me.
much so.
Yeah.